Peter, how are you?
I'm good, Roberto. Thanks so much for having me on.
Peter, tell everyone what it is that you do.
Sure, I'm an editor at City and State New York. I cover the state politics beat, but I'm also pretty knowledgeable about what's going on in city politics as well. So I'm here to give you kind of a recap of the week in both city and state politics.
I appreciate you, Peter. Let's start with the budget.
Yeah,
What's your over-under on when it's happening, when it's done, and what are you hearing are the sticking points at this current time?
Yeah, so the latest that we're hearing on the budget is that it's probably, they're at least going to have like a conceptual deal early next week. That doesn't necessarily mean the final bills will be written and passed next week. It could go into the week after, but I would be very surprised if it went beyond, the first week of May at this point. I feel like they've gotten over a lot of the sticking points. One of the biggest was discovery reform. This issue of the DAs are saying that the reforms passed in 2019 that went into effect in 2020 have been slowing things down, leading to cases getting dismissed because the DAs were not able to hand over evidence to the defense soon enough. They wanted some of those reforms rolled back. That was something that the Assembly and the Senate were really taking a hard line on. At this point, it seems like they've at least figured out a conceptual deal, so they've gotten past that. The next thing is the mask ban. That was very controversial, especially because, you see President Donald Trump going after masked protesters, deporting them, sending them to El Salvador. So it's something that Democrats who may have been comfortable with it last year when there were a lot of concerns about pro-Palestine protests on campuses like Columbia are now very worried about empowering the government to go after protesters. So that was something that a lot of people were pushing back on. At this point, it seems like a mask ban is not going to be included in the budget. The other thing, kind of a sticking point, although at this point I think everyone pretty much agrees, is the ban on cell phones in schools. That is something that most of the legislature is now on board with. And it's a top priority for Governor Hochul to have what they call a bell-to-bell ban, meaning that students cannot use their phones from when the first bell rings to when school lets out. So even in between classes, they're not allowed to use the phones.
Peter, what do you make of now let's talk the politics, right?
Yeah.
You talked about the policy of the budget and what the holdups are. There's politics in government. What are the optics of a really late budget for Governor Hochul, whose polling is not great? What does this mean? Does it mean anything? Or is it she stood her ground on criminal justice, right? On things that seem in a world where things were leaning more towards the center as we are to the far left,
right?
Based on what we're reading and hearing and what the city and the bellwether right now, and what does this mean for her?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there was a recent Siena poll that found that 72% of likely New York voters were upset or concerned that the budget was late. But then when you ask them about the policies that the governor is supporting, things like a cell phone ban in schools, things like discovery reform, even a mask ban, they supported all those things. And they said they support the governor holding up the budget to ensure that they are in the budget. So while people might not like the idea in the abstract of a budget being late, and, the governor has never had an on-time budget. Her last 4 budgets, ever since she took office, have been late. Now, some of them have only been like a week late. Some of them have been a month late. But the governor has argued, and it seems like polling more or less bears it out, that people might not like a late budget, but they respect someone who can hold it up in order to ensure that the policies that New Yorkers want are in there. And so we're seeing finally that the governor's approval rating, which has been underwater for at least a year or two, is now back in the positives. I mean, I think it was like 1% net positive. It's like 44 like her and 43 don't like her, but that's still better than last year when more people didn't like her than did approve of her job. And it seems like because she's standing her ground in the budget fight, because she's aggressively going after Trump as well, people are warming to the governor, which is very important because she's up for election next year.
Peter, let's move to the city now, because I know you play in both ponds. What do you make of the most recent news that Attorney General Tish James and the largest union, DC 37, have come on board and are now endorsing Speaker Adrienne Adams, and Attorney General is saying she's going to stump for the Speaker and go to churches as a surrogate? What does it mean for the Speaker, who obviously it's a major endorsement, but the money's still not there? Give me your analysis of that.
I mean,
let's start there.
I think that it's no secret that the Attorney General has supported the Speaker. She encouraged her to run. But then Adrienne did announce that she was running for mayor, and the Speaker the Attorney General was not there at that announcement. She was not saying anything publicly. I found her at Albany Somos last month, and I said, hey, are you going to endorse Adrienne Adams? And she said, have a good night, and walked away. So the fact that she is now coming out very publicly, despite the fact that, as Attorney General, you don't always want to get too involved in the politics. But now she's coming out very publicly. She's going to be going to black churches. She's going to be stumping for the Speaker. I think that is really important. I think that a lot of people don't know who Adrienne Adams is. Anyone in politics knows, anyone in the city council knows, but most ordinary voters do not know who she is. And her name is Adams, so people are going to confuse her with the current mayor. But people do know who the Attorney General is. I think she has a lot of support within the Black and the Latino community. So for her to be going to people and saying, I support Adrienne Adams, you should vote for her, don't vote for Andrew Cuomo, I think that is going to be really powerful. The same is true of the DC 37 endorsement. Obviously, most unions have been endorsing Andrew Cuomo. Whether that's because they support Andrew Cuomo or because they're afraid of him, kind of doesn't matter. If they are encouraging their members to go out and vote for him, that is a very powerful base of support for the former governor. But DC 37 is obviously the largest union in New York City, and it has a lot of Black and Latino working class members, the kind of people who would form the base of Andrew Cuomo's coalition. So if they can go very hard for Adrienne and encourage their members to go out, talk to people they know in the community, and make sure that Adrienne is getting that name recognition, that people see her as a real alternative to Cuomo, I think that could really help her campaign. Now, as you say, she doesn't have the money. And what that really means, because she's raised some money, but she doesn't have matching funds, because she wasn't able to raise enough, because she launched her campaign like a week before the matching funds deadline. So it's not that she hasn't been able to raise money, it's that she couldn't raise enough money on a very, very short time scale. I think she would be a leading candidate if she had announced last year, but she didn't. So the question is whether she'll be able to raise enough money, whether there will be independent expenditures. Is DC 37 or other unions that back her going to pay for ads even when her campaign doesn't have the money to get on TV? Because she's probably not going to end up getting matching funds until the very end of May, which is not the worst thing in the world, since a lot of people are only going to be tuning into the race in June, but it is definitely later than you would like. We saw the first ad this week from a campaign, which was Zohran Mamdani. We've also seen PACs supporting Andrew Cuomo that have already started advertising. For people like Adrienne Adams, who don't have a ton of name recognition, are not that well known in the city, now and early mid-May is really when you want to start getting on people's TV screens so that they know who you are. I don't necessarily think that Cuomo has a ton of diehard support in Black and Latino working class communities, but I think that he has a lot of name recognition. And if no one else, if they don't know anyone else who's running, then they're going to default to the two people they know, which is Mayor Eric Adams, because he's the incumbent mayor, and former Governor Andrew Cuomo, because he was the former governor. people know those names. You talk to a lot of people who don't pay attention to the news, and they say, oh, well, I don't support Eric Adams. He's corrupt. He's working with Trump. So I guess, the former governor is running. I guess I support him. They don't realize that there are even people who don't like Andrew Cuomo will say, like, I wish someone else would run. And it's like there were 8 or 9 candidates running, but most of them are not well known. The main exception is, of course, Zohran Mamdani, who has a very strong base on the far left and has been able to win over and energize lots of young voters. That's why he's in second place.
So, Peter, this week there was another poll, minus Eric Adams, who's running as an independent, that showed that former Governor Cuomo gained ground, right?
Yes.
As did Zohran Mamdani.
Yes.
In a world where Adrian Adams gets these 2 major endorsements, who does, obviously it helps Adrian Adams, but who reaps the benefit, better said, of her potentially putting a dent or slowing down the Andrew Cuomo train? Who is the other person that stands to gain from her?
Yeah,
I think I get her, right? Obviously,
right.
But who else stands to gain in a ranked choice world with Cuomo, somebody taking a jab at Cuomo?
Yeah, I think it's Zohran Mamdani, and it's
despite being far left, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, because he's in second place. He had 22% of the vote, while Cuomo has 45% of the vote. Now, in a ranked choice world, so the way it works is once someone gets more than 50%, you can't beat them. They have a majority. Even if it's 53% for Cuomo and 47% for Zohran, at the end of the day, Cuomo is going to win. So if he's at 45% in the first round, that almost means ranked choice doesn't matter. After like 1 or 2 rounds, he'll be over that 50% hump. It's possible, there's also 14% of voters who are undecided. If 5% of those go to Cuomo, then he'll just get 50% in the first round. Ranked choice won't even matter. So if anyone wants to have a hope of stopping Cuomo, the key is to have multiple candidates who are seen as viable alternatives to him who cross-endorse each other. If you have a first ballot where Andrew Cuomo is at 45% and Zohran is at 30% and Adrian Adams and Brad Lander are at like 10%, Cuomo is still likely going to win because it's just not that far from 45 to 50. What you need is a first ballot where Andrew Cuomo is under 40%. If he's at 35%, Zohran is at 25%, Lander is at 10 or 15%, and Adrian Adams is at 15%, then that, and they've all cross-endorsed each other, then that, I think, is a world in which someone other than Cuomo can win. So the key is to have multiple candidates who are cutting into Andrew Cuomo's margins and making sure that they all cross-endorse each other so that anyone who's voting for Adrian would rank Lander and Mamdani.
Who won the week?
I think undoubtedly on the city level, Adrian won the week. I mean, those are some huge endorsements. DC 37 and getting the public support of Attorney General Tish James.
Current Mayor Eric Adams.
For now.
No, current Mayor Eric Adams. Thoughts on him? Running as an independent, has a budget left, is rolling out policy like it's no one's business, right? Good policy.
Yeah.
Early learn, right? Whether, whatever happened, people have short memories, right? If you're a working class family, and he's being aggressive, using the office of the mayor.
Well, I mean, what he always does with these, budget fights, and he's done it for like years now, is he will release a plan to cut funding, and then people will get mad, and then he'll turn around and say, I'm restoring funding. I'm no longer going to cut libraries. I'm no longer going to cut early education.
Well, it's in all fairness to Mayor Adams, that's always been part of the budget.
Yes.
Right? I mean, remember firehouses being a thing always, right? Libraries.
Yeah.
And then at the end, that's sort of like the bargaining, right? Like, what are we going to get back? What are we going to get in return, right? So that's not exclusive to Mayor Adams.
Right. And, if he's able to communicate, focus on I'm not cutting these things, I'm protecting them, then that is something that I think could resonate with a lot of people. They see him as fighting for the city. But the problem with Mayor Adams, I think, is that a lot of people just see him as being too close to the Trump administration. He is often reluctant to criticize Donald Trump. People believe that, he is corrupt because of the federal investigation, and the fact that the federal investigation was not dropped because they said, oh, he's innocent. It was dropped because Trump's appointees said, you got to stop going after Eric Adams because he needs to help us with, the mass deportation agenda. So I think that people still feel like there's a cloud over him, and they feel that he doesn't necessarily have the best interests of the city at heart. I think it would have been almost impossible for him to win a Democratic primary. So it makes sense that he's running as an independent. Now, the question is, how will he do as an independent? I think that's going to depend a lot on who wins the Democratic primary. If Zoran wins the Democratic primary, a lot of people are going to say, oh, he's too far left. Maybe we should stick with someone who's more moderate. I don't think they'll go all the way to Curtis Sliwa, the Republican nominee, so they might end up settling for Eric Adams. If Governor Cuomo wins the Democratic primary, then it's possible that Zoran or someone else would run as a WFP candidate. Then you'd have a 4 or 5-way race. But I think that it would be difficult for Eric Adams to get much traction then, because I think a lot of his base overlaps heavily with former Governor Cuomo's base.
Peter, what do you think about this? I was just as, similar to what we're doing here, just chatting with someone and looking at different scenarios and hypotheticals. The fact that the mayor has you all a weekly avail.
Yeah.
He gets to do events all over the city. He gets to cut ribbons all over the city. He can announce whatever he wants. He can do pretty much whatever. He's the mayor of New York City. Senior town halls, community town halls, which is you can use the office and get out, be out and about, make these great announcements. The fact that he can technically weekly use his weekly avail to attack potentially, right? We've seen him take shots at former Governor Cuomo. We've seen him take shots at public advocate Jumaane Williams, who's not even running, but he just feels a need to. Doesn't care for the guy,
and
right?
Orlando.
Yes.
Those are the people he loves to go after.
Yeah, he goes after them. Could that have an impact? That's still a bully pulpit. He's still the mayor on the ultimate outcome in the Democratic primary.
It's tough to say. I think that if he were to aggressively go after the former governor, then it potentially could, because, again, a lot of the people...
And I only say that, it's just a hypothetical. You think because of all the reasons you delineated before, it's like a tree falling in the forest, because it's like, look at the source, right? Based on people that think, he's corrupt, he's tied to Trump. Is it like, look who's saying it, who cares? Or do you think it really has any could potentially stick? That's the question, better said.
It's tough to say, because I think that, the mayor does have a real bully pulpit, and he was able to get a lot of support from communities just by going there and showing up. But because I think the concerns about Trump and the corruption have broken through, it's not just something that the political press has talked about, because it's such a crazy story, and it involves Donald Trump, and people are concerned about Donald Trump. I think that even in the communities that strongly supported the mayor, now there's kind of a distaste for him. So I think it would have trouble breaking through. But I also do think that if the mayor were to really go after the former governor, it might break through, because there are the kinds of people who would potentially support the former governor. I think a lot of them are the ones who trust the mayor the most. Even if they don't trust him that much, they still trust him more than most other people in the city. Talking about Black working class communities in, Brooklyn and in like outer Queens. Those are the communities where I think, what the mayor says could potentially make a difference in terms of cutting into Cuomo's margins, although I don't think it would have a huge effect, just because I don't think that many people are taking the mayor seriously at this point.
Peter, there was a recent story in the Times about the former governor's strategy, Rose Garden, right? There was also a story in Politico about his actual record. Some people will point to COVID, and some people say that was his, shining moment. You got to see Governor Cuomo in charge, right? Managing this never before seen crisis. There's the other side to that. What do you think that's about? That he's still marching through with impunity. It's still his race to lose,
right,
by far, right? What do you think that is about? Do you think it's like, hey, if he has faults, if he has shortcomings, we don't care, there is chaos. He exudes confidence, control, power, competency. What do you think the magic is? Right? Like I was talking to someone a while back, and in this the new word, cancel culture.
Yeah.
Trump this is not even a word, I'm making it up, uncancelable, right?
Right.
It seems like former Governor Cuomo is Teflon.
Yeah.
But what do you attribute that to as a member of the press?
It's tough to say.
Because some people they just don't. Right? Bill de Blasio he just couldn't, maybe it's because he ran for president.
Yeah.
Or he was always doing these things. His policy sort of never broke through. A lot of the politics now that people are saying.
Yeah.
Right?
But
when he was actual mayor, it was like,
mayor,
but look, to his credit, he just can't, there were things he did which didn't help his own cause, right? Just...
Yeah, with the former governor, it's tough to say whether or not, he's Teflon, because, he did resign. Like, he was not able to beat that. But it is in the past, and I think a lot of people do remember him from those COVID briefings. Whether or not his COVID policy actually ended up being that helpful, they remember that he was going on TV and reassuring people and, rhetorically challenging the Trump administration. Now, when you talk about the Rose Garden strategy, I think that what the governor likes, and also what people associate him with, for better or worse, is control. And he's very reluctant to go into any situation in which he doesn't have total control over it. That's one reason why you don't see him doing that many, he's not doing events on the street. Anytime he does an event, people are heavily vetted. He's generally not going to mayoral forums. One of the only ones he went to this week, he got up there and started speaking, and protesters stormed the stage and unveiled a banner. The response was, these are paid protesters. Talk about being very Trumpian. So I think that he doesn't want to go anywhere where he's not in control. And he believes that if he just continues talking about what he wants to do and how he will, protect the city without actually going out and having uncontrolled interactions with people, then there's less of an opportunity for him to be embarrassed or criticized publicly. And that seems to be working for him. He doesn't need to worry about going out there and making sure everyone knows who he is, because everyone already knows who he is. The threat to Cuomo is if any of the criticisms against him break through and start to land. And that's why I do think, so far they have not. People don't seem to care about, the sexual harassment stuff or the concerns about how he handled COVID in nursing homes. But my big question, and this is what I was saying to, former Comptroller Stringer earlier, is what happens when Cuomo's opponents start running ads constantly attacking him? Is that something that's going to break through when people are constantly seeing it on their TV screen? Is it going to change their perception of him? It's possible it will. It's also possible that people will say, oh, look at how they're attacking him. This is all, politically motivated. this is more of a reason to support him because he's, an independent voice, and if everyone is attacking him, clearly he must be doing something right.
Peter, who do you think has the potential to break out based on the amount of money, based on the history, based on their experience? Does anyone, we know Zoran, right? He's got maxed out. He is right now the wonder boy, the golden child, right? Everyone says he's run the best campaign by far.
Absolutely.
Creative, innovative, right? Populist, minus Zoran, minus former Governor Cuomo, who came out of the gate smoking. Who has the ability, you think, with this amount of time left on the clock, and understanding that TV? I get it, Speaker Adams. I'm not in any way going to minimize and not say because these are two very, very big endorsements, though late, very big. But you still need a lot of money to run TV ads. And this is expensive. It's expensive. Right. Who do you think has the opportunity? Maybe you say, now with, Speaker Adams, donors will be more reluctant now to, open their wallets now because they see that she's got momentum. Who do you think has the ability to break out with this time? That no one's really, that you think, oh, wow, this person can put it together. Still a lot of time left.
Yeah, I think obviously, with Speaker Adams, it will be interesting to see what happens in the next week or two. Do these endorsements really move the needle? Does, the Attorney General really start stumping for her every day? That is something that I think could start to move the needle. Maybe you get more donors then. It's kind of a snowball effect. Other than that, Controller Lander has been racking up a lot of endorsements. He has a decent amount of money, but he hasn't really broken through. I think that former Controller Stringer is a pretty polished politician. His campaign hasn't really taken off that much either, but he has some money, and I think he is very charismatic. He's been doing this for so long. I think that maybe if he runs very good TV ads, there is a potential for him to start eating into some of Cuomo's margin, especially with more moderate white voters in Manhattan, in Brownstone, Brooklyn.
Let's take a step back and go back to current Mayor Adams. Someone, again, he is keen on saying that he's never gotten fair break from the press, which most mayors do. Former Mayor de Blasio, right? Let's just no, wait, let me finish. He says, look, I've never gotten a fair shake, right? This is not, considering the work that I've done, what I've accomplished. What do you think when if he is a one-termer, again, anything can happen. What do you think are his three biggest accomplishments in terms of policy?
I think probably City of Yes. He really fought for that and got that across the finish line. Not sure about the other two, to be honest.
Okay, that's fine. If you can only come up with one, that's fine.
I think that, the mayor has been an effective advocate for the city, but I definitely don't think he has been so involved in, the policy nitty-gritty. I do think he is now, trying to invest more in early childhood education, which is great, but I also think that early on in his tenure, he stopped the investments in 3K that former Mayor de Blasio had kind of planned to go into effect. So I don't know if I credit him with now investing in it.
So now for the annals of history, his Alamo, his Waterloo was Trump. Anything specific that you say that was the straw that broke the camel's back? I had one reporter say that the Tucker Carlson interview was the fatal blow.
I think that...
Anything stand out as you think, if it's the case that he's a one-termer, what do you think was the thing that people said enough? Was it the 4 deputy mayors resigning? Because that's what the speaker points to, that's what compelled her to run?
I think that he would... Once he was indicted on federal corruption charges over the Turkey stuff, I mean, that is something that broke through. You know, you see it on the news all the time. You see it on Saturday Night Live. That's something that, like, makes it into the culture. He's the first mayor to be indicted in, like, 100 years. That then makes it very difficult to run for re-election. But I don't think it was necessarily fatal. I think that, ironically, it was very bad when he got indicted, and it was probably worse when the case was canceled or dismissed because of how that was done. I mean, when you have, you know, the Trump-appointed U.S. attorneys resigning because they say this is a corrupt quid pro quo,
yeah. And
I think that was pretty bad.
And it just keeps on giving because 3 more resigned the other day, which sort of gave it new life, brought it back.
And, you know, the reason that the deputy mayors resigned was because they were concerned about his connection to Trump. It is interesting to say, what happens if Trump doesn't win in 2024 and, you know, Biden's still president and the case continues? Like, then I think the mayor would go to trial. It would probably not turn out well for him. You know, he might have to take a plea deal. And then he probably would have difficulty winning re-election again. But I at least don't think he would be as ostracized from the Democratic Party as he is now with this connection with Trump.
All right, let's wrap here. Winner, you have to pick a winner. That's it. You have to make a prediction. 1-word answers. Who wins New York City? Let's go down ballot. New York City Comptroller. Levine, Brannon, Parker. Pick a winner. You got to pick one.
Brannon.
Brannon?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You're going to go with he's polling right now, but hey, you're going to go Brannon? Good.
I think he has a lot of support.
Okay, interesting. Public advocate.
Giuliani.
Manhattan Borough President. Hoylman, Powers. Those are the ones I could think of off the top of my head.
I'll say Hoylman Siegel.
Interesting. Bronx Borough Presidency. Vanessa Gibson, Salamanca.
Salamanca.
Ooh, interesting. Brooklyn Borough Presidency. Reynoso, Carrie Edwards.
Reynoso.
Okay. Those are the ones I can think of. That doesn't mean there aren't races, and apologies if there are, and I forgot to mention them. Peter, thank you so much. Anything you want to sort of say about the week? Any that I forgot to ask you, since this is the end of week recap. Anything you want to mention? Anything you want to add before we wrap?
I just think that, you know, New York City and state politics are so influenced now by what's going on with the Trump administration. I don't think you can analyze what's happening in city or state politics without looking at the impact that Trump is having, whether that is the cuts in federal funding, the way that Trump is going after, you know, immigrants and protesters. As I said, that is what doomed the mask ban, was the fact that Trump kind of took it up. We might see new pushes for sanctuary city and sanctuary state legislation in, you know, the state legislature and the city council because of how Trump has made this such a politicized issue. You know, last year under Biden, a lot of people were like, oh, we need to crack down on immigration. Now that people are seeing what that immigration crackdown looks like, with New Yorkers being detained by ICE and deported or sent to El Salvador, which there have been some cases of that, I think people are losing their appetite for it. And we're going to see, and already are seeing, a bit of a backlash to that very conservative framing on immigration.
Best day on the job. Best day on the job if you've been doing this work.
Oh God.
Did you break a story? Did you just told me prior to us starting that you broke that Mamdani was running?
Yeah, I was really happy when I broke Mamdani was running.
Is that the best day on the job?
I think so. I think so.
Worst day on the job.
Oh God. Probably after the 2024 election with Trump winning, just because it reminded me of what happened in 2016 when I was at Politico, where you have all these story ideas for, like, what is the Biden administration going to do? How is, the Biden administration going to continue working with New York? And then it's like all of that just goes up in smoke because now Trump is in and he's going to change the entire, political field, and you need to start re-reporting everything.
Peter, thank you so much again. This won't be the last time, hopefully.
Yes,
All right?
I'm happy to come back.
Had a lot of fun, and you gave me a lot of great insight and some pretty bold predictions. Thanks again, Peter. All the best.